Hello, my friends. Welcome to our next round of interviews. We're trying this flow of 3 guest episodes, then a V Sarah moment, but let us know how it goes. V and I miss each other, so we can't go that long. But it also turns out you guys enjoy hearing us make fools out of ourselves and occasionally stumbling upon some wisdom at the same time. So you're welcome. And also, if you have any topics, moments, content, comedy specials, books, et cetera, that you think would be fun for V and me to reflect on, send them our way. You can DM us on the Instagrams at The Mothers Pod or send an email to hello@themothersmedia.co. But today, we get to share a powerful discussion with someone who should probably run for office one day, though she says she won't, but I hope she will, Meghan Joyce. Damn, if there's someone out there who I feel like I should have been, that person who I look at and I'm like, if I just worked a little harder, it might be Meghan. Incredibly smart, incredibly capable, incredibly joyful, has incredible business savvy, holds her own and makes space for others in a man's world, endless energy. She's the person at a work offsite who brings both the enthusiasm to make you not hate being there and pushes you to actually do the productive things that, of course, nobody really wants to do at an offsite. I've never been in an offsite with her, but I just got that sense. She's a doer, a joyful, level-headed, efficient, magical doer, kind of like her latest company, Duckbill. Meghan is the co-founder and CEO of Duckbill, which uses a sprinkle of AI on top of the magic of thoughtful humans to take care of the part of your to-do list that you hate so you can get back to what you love. It's also an impressively funded startup. They snagged a cool $33 million in their seed and Series A round, I believe. Before Duckbill, Meghan was COO at Oscar Health, no big deal, and held key leadership roles at Uber, including as the GM of the East Coast. If you were in Boston in the mid-2010s, you'd see her on the cover of the Globe, helping to navigate the tricky relationship, to say the least, between Uber and taxis. Meghan serves on the boards of the Boston Beer Company and Guardant Health. She's also a Henry Crown Fellow and member of the Aspen Institute's Global Leadership Network. And she's a mother of 3. Similar to me, she came out of retirement a bit to have her third, who is about 6 months old. So, as we say in the very description of this podcast, she is absolutely a person I look at and I'm like, how the fuck is she doing this? And how is she? As you'll hear, she's great. It's nuts, it's chaos, but what became so clear to me in our interview was that she really, truly, genuinely loves it. She's in these big jobs because she likes doing them. She finds them fun. Not for ego, not for greed, but because she likes it and because she can. And she wants to make the world a little bit better. Meghan has built a full life around what matters to her and what brings her joy. And I think if we start from there, investing our time in things that align with our values, that we believe in, that we find meaningful and fun, the energy often just flows. Meghan, thank you for sharing your sincere joy with us, alongside the honest moments of hard. So proud of what you're building and how you're building it and why. So please enjoy our conversation with Meghan Joyce.
I'm just so excited to talk to both of you.
I know. Me too. I was so thrilled you were into it, and because you're like just the perfect kind of model of everything. You're out there doing really objectively impressive big things, and then also have this other part of your life at home now with a 6-month-old in addition to older kids. And I'm like, how is she doing
How
this?
are you doing it?
Right back at both of you, really, truly. And for what it's worth, I was at a spring concert last night, and I was walking in with another parent. I was like, how's it going? And they were like, bonkers. And I was like, yeah, that's exactly the word to describe it.
Yeah.
And it's like a very joyful bonkers, but it's bonkers. And like, I think the more we can talk about this, the better. So
I know. Yeah. Okay, cool. So we can just roll into questions and keep it cool and casual because that's how we are. But yeah, we like to start, and I need to find a way to not say this absolutely every interview, but I really do enjoy hearing people describe their backstory and kind of as they're telling sort of how we get to where we are today. As they're going through that process, they're often like self-reflecting and being like, actually, wait, why did I do that? And does that make sense? And these dots actually in retrospect do connect or they don't connect. But I'm curious like how you tell the story of Meghan, because there are many ways to say it. But like, what's the story of Meghan to you and how we get to today?
my gosh. Well, this feels so indulgent and lovely, and thank you for asking.
Welcome to
Truly
therapy.
is so, no,
It's so
literally,
fun to
like,
get it out. Yeah.
time do you have? Because I have all day here.
Yes.
I think the origin story is everything. And as a founder, I know that to be
Yeah.
true for my company and probably for me too. Like I was raised in a big family in the Boston area, bunch of siblings, two incredible parents who were both amazing role models in both career and personal parenthood life and took very different paths, right? Like one of my parents, my dad worked all the way through, traveled 5 days a week for a good part of my childhood to have a career that supported our family. And my mom, who was equally brilliant and invested in her career, ended up taking several years off to be home with all of us little numbskulls because
Yeah.
it was more expensive to pay for childcare and all of the puts and takes that that requires than she was making as a
Yeah.
brilliant professional. And so I was shaped by that and, you know, a lot of other things and knew about myself that I love work. I find it incredibly fulfilling, incredibly fun. But I also, at the end of the day, my family is everything. I'm incredibly close with them.
Yeah.
And you know, was kind of coming out of college when the Anne Marie Slaughter "Women Can't Have It All" article
Right.
was published, and it had a huge impact on me. And I think the world of her, and to hear someone of her caliber and standing in, you know, the early 2000s saying it's not possible right now was, you know, arresting to me. It kind of like stopped me in my tracks, inspired me about how can we make it easier and easier for people who want that. And there's no judgment. Some people want all the things, some people don't. Some people want to have a deep career and or a deep family or vice versa. And my objective is really about choice.
Mm-hmm.
That I want people to be able to have the choice. I want the choice of
Mm-hmm.
how I want my life to look. This kind of one precious life. And
Yeah.
the more we can give people choice on how they're spending their time, it shouldn't be so expensive. It shouldn't be so stigmatized to live the life you want.
Yeah.
And so that's really what has inspired me. And, you know, my career started very traditionally consulting, investing, did a stint at the US Treasury during the recovery from the 2008 financial crisis. And it was this moment where I really felt connected to my work from a mission perspective in a way that I knew I never wanted to be without. And
Mm-hmm.
so when I went to business school and thought about what I wanted to be doing next, I wanted the pace and rigor and teamwork and excitement and engagement of a private sector business job with the connection to the mission that I felt at the
Yeah.
Treasury. And so it's when I landed at Uber. It was very early, about 100 people running the Boston market. From there, I
Huge
led the
deal.
East Coast.
Yeah, that's wild.
Yes, it was a
Just
big deal.
Uber when it was
Yeah,
100
yeah.
people.
Yeah, but
That's
it
so
was a
cool.
big that was a big job. And like a lot of contentious things going on. This was
Yeah.
right around when there was a lot of pushback from the taxi industry.
Right.
You were like in front of whatever form of courtroom, like defending Uber. And it was a high everything job.
Sarah, you're too kind.
No,
It
it's true.
honestly was such a privilege to be able to do. And it was born out of, frankly, inspiration for the choice that Uber was giving these drivers to work in a way that was flexible and allowed them to set their schedule, their timeline, take
Mm,
their destiny and their income into their own control. You know, my first Uber ride, I was chatting with the driver, and he and his friend were sharing a car and using the income to put themselves through community college. And I thought that was incredible. And I
mm-hmm.
knew I wanted to be a part of that. And so that was what made it easy for me to stand in circumstances that, I don't know, maybe I would have found scary at another
Yeah.
moment in my life and say, no, I feel incredibly brave because I am doing something that I believe in.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, sometimes I look back and say like, "Oh, I can't believe we went through that." But I'll tell
Yeah.
you, it like gives me great perspective with children who yell at you and swear at you and all the things that they do. And saying,
And
like,
you're like,
"Ah,
this
let's
is
be
not going
worse."
to be a
Exactly.
I
That's
will not
exactly
be requesting you as my driver again. Thank you.
exactly right.
You didn't have
So
kids
yeah.
yet, did you? Or when did kids enter the scene? Because you had Uber and then Oscar Health, another huge job. Obviously now you're starting your own company and there are other things in the background, just casually being on boards. Like when did
I like to work.
Yes, that's great. When did kids come on the scene?
I had 2 kids while at Uber.
You
I had 2
did.
kids while at Uber, and
Wow.
I think it's a reflection of the experience that I had at Uber that not everyone did, but
Yeah.
I got promoted when I was 7 months pregnant with my first child, from leading Boston to leading, the East Coast. And then again, when I was expecting to, with my second, from leading the East Coast to leading the US and Canada.
Yeah.
I reported to an incredible woman the entire time. Like, that was my experience at Uber. I felt it
I'm so
was,
glad. Yeah.
a really empowering place. It was not that way for everyone. And
Yeah.
it eventually became hyper
Sure.
motivating in the years where that kind of hit our radar and became clear, to help make it that kind of place for everyone.
I think about this.
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt just for a thing, but I
No.
do think within Google, I had a similar experience where, I got promoted while I was out on maternity leave. And there were a lot of examples of that happening. But that was when times were good. And objectively, this is what's so fucked about it. Like, times are still good for Google. We've just like
course.
lost track of what we
Yeah.
need to be achieving. But I often think about, okay, great for billion-trillion-dollar companies to be generous towards, in this context, women, and do the right thing by them. But how hard it is for even the biggest, most successful companies to continue to do right by them when there isn't this sort of like free money, there's no consequences kind of culture. And I personally saw that shift through the 12 years that I was at Google. And I felt for, in a weird way, I sort of felt for Google, but I also felt for the small companies that are like, I would love to give this doctor 9 months off in my small practice, but
Yes.
honestly, I don't have capacity financially. Like, I don't know how to make, so it's all of this. And it goes a little bit back. And I want to ask you more about the having it all, how that mantra is like trailed after you as you've gone through your career. How you think about having it all as you were, like, let's use the Uber example. You're not popping out 2 kids. No one pops out kids. But how
Easiest thing I've ever done, whatever. I don't know.
With each child, is that having it all thing like popping up in your head more? Or are you like, we can juggle all of this? Like, how are there trade-offs and the like micro trade-offs that you're like, ugh?
Of course there are, and I think this was part of Anne-Marie Slaughter's point, or at least my interpretation of her point, that everybody makes trade-offs, men, women, everybody. To fast forward, after going from Uber to Oscar as COO and then founding my own thing, part of the point of my now company, Duckbill, is making it easier for people to have that choice in how they spend their time and how they live their lives. And even I have moments where I'm like, this is incredibly difficult. This is an impossible set of trade-offs I'm facing, or those moments where you're like, oh, yeah, I'm feeling like nothing is going fabulously well today.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I think inevitability of trade-offs needs to live beside, in my world at least, or in my life, beside this notion that we can do things to make those trade-offs a little easier. We can do things at the policy level where we help small companies or make it a norm to have or fund parental leave or healthcare or all these things that make having it all really difficult. We can also do things from a product level. And part of the founding of Duckbill, which is the personal assistant for everyone, that everyone should be able to afford, was the notion that there can be product solutions and capitalist solutions to this too. And by the way, like, there are a whole lot of product and capitalist solutions that make it easier to be a working man. Think of the solutions that solve tasks that were stereotypically, and I'm putting this in big air quotes, men's work, right? There are landscapers, there are handymen, plumbers, electricians, like there are whole fields, trades around doing this work that men traditionally did in families, heteronormative families.
Yeah.
And then the job became coordinating with those trades. And somehow that fell over to a lot of women in this balance of the mental load. And so what Duckbill is setting out to do is to build a trade, build a product around a lot of this work that women traditionally bear, and the studies and data would show that to be true, and make those trade-offs a little easier, because of course we all have to make trade-offs every day in business and family and life, but there are things we can do to mitigate the pain, and let's do them.
Yeah. Can I ask you some existential questions about Duckbill?
Always, please.
And then I want to ask you more existential questions about you.
Life.
But one, I've been reflecting on this, and I think it's fascinating, and I love the concept. I love the brand of it also. Like, I love, in a lot of the taglines, we're talking about allowing you to choose joy and find more joy in life, which is something that V and I and this podcast talk a lot about, and how, especially for mothers, finding a moment to really insist on their own joy and how critical that is to maintain a sense of identity. I think one thing that I'm curious about is, we talk a lot about mothers and what it is to be kind of grappling with the idea of what is it to be just a mom, and why is it just, and is it enough to be a mother, and the, the invisible labor, the mental load, all these things that define mothering in the modern day. Two questions. One, I'm curious about what it means, because within just a mom, it's like implies that what I'm doing isn't really that important or valuable. I'm curious, as you are taking a lot of the labor of motherhood and pricing it out at $100 a month, I'm curious if you think about what that reflects to mothers of what they're doing. Like, there's so, and I think not to tell you what I think your answer is going to be, but I think it's like, well, now you can invest in the other more sort of deeper parts of mothering. But I'm curious, like, how, and I'm sure you've thought about this because you're a very in tune mother and person. So I'm just curious, like, how you've thought about that.
Yes, this is such an astute question, and gosh, we could talk for hours about everything you were just describing. So the philosophy behind Duckbill is, give us the stuff you dread, so that you can focus on what you love instead, exactly as you alluded to, Sarah. And the goal is to make the outsourcing of the stuff you dread as easy and affordable as possible. You should not have to be an expert delegator or a manager, and you should not have to be a millionaire in order to get that necessary but pain in the butt stuff off your plate. If you want to, you don't have to. There's no judgment. And one of the reasons that we scoped the product broadly and a bit in a choose your own adventure way is because one person might dread waiting on hold and negotiating with customer support to get their money back on a product that arrived broken. Another person might dread planning a kid's birthday party. And there's no judgment on one versus the other. And I think the way that I personally use Duckbill, with no judgment for how anybody else does, is I want to be there for moments that I consider priceless, right? Like when my kid is up sick in the middle of the night, or when they're performing in a concert, or when we're just hanging, spending time together, and those like quiet moments, and their fears or anxieties or joys or brilliant little observations come out. What I don't want to be doing is multitasking that plus waiting on hold with customer support, or spending the time, so much time planning the birthday party that I'm not paying attention to the child I want to be celebrating. And that I want to make as affordable as possible for people. Again, so that they have the choice. I remember vividly when Lean In came out and raised a whole bunch of new ideas around how women might approach having it all. And there was a lot of criticism of Sheryl Sandberg, the author, for the fact that she had this team of people who was enabling her to lean in every day. And I remember my reaction being like, look, I don't judge Sheryl for having a team. I think it's a shame that she has to be as, frankly, privileged as she is to afford that team.
Totally.
Right.
We should all have access to that. So the objective is really that. Let's make it as affordable and destigmatized and cool as possible for you to get that stuff that you dread off your plate, so that you can focus on the priceless stuff, whatever
Yeah.
that is for you, without
Right.
judgment or fear of what it's going to do to your and your family's budget.
Yeah. The other piece that I found interesting, even before Duckbill entered the scene, when I was sort of among other working mothers, mostly working mothers that I was in circles with, I found that there's this interesting tension about there are folks that resent some of these responsibilities and expectations, but also don't want them to be taken away. Like they're distressed by them, they're oppressed by them, but they also need them. And I found Duckbill sort of inserts itself into this place of where does value come as a mother? And again, Duckbill serves not just mothers, but in this context
Yeah.
with this podcast, like I just found that fascinating of how tech kind of introduces another layer of how we define our role as a mother, create
Yeah.
value as a mother. And I'm wondering, I don't know if you've experienced this too, but I would happily offload. My mothering is not about scheduling a dentist appointment. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I would
Yes.
happily hand those off to someone as long as they can do it as well as I can do. And also thank you for including AI, but also humans, because I've talked about this, and as someone who's sort of like been in the tech side of
Yeah.
all things AI is wonderful. Candidly, it also horrifies me, but I think it needs to be done in partnership with humans. And the human touch is so essential and is basically a premium. Like human touch is now a
Yeah.
premium. We can
Yes.
outsource as much as we can. And so now you're giving people, you're leveraging automation to make it efficient, but you're using humans to make it real and meaningful and intentional. And I am so glad that it hasn't become all AI all the time.
Yeah.
I'm so glad to hear you say that. It's such an important part of our mission, frankly. I mean,
Yeah.
we could talk forever, and I want to get back to your question around how do mothers and parents find value in their own work, and because that's a fascinating one. As a brief aside, part of the other aspect of Duckbill's mission is to create dignified, noble work. And one thing that I saw at Uber was, we went through this whole initiative to try to get more women to drive on the platform. We saw significantly higher proportions of men signing up to drive than women. And when we talked to women, we heard a number of different things. Women are not a monolith. But we also heard, I don't want to be driving around with a drunk stranger in the backseat of my car at 2 a.m. Or I do have responsibilities that I don't allow me to be out of the home constantly that I want to work around because that's important to me. And it occurred to me when we were starting Duckbill that this could be a solution that could give work to people of all gender identities that creates flexible, noble work where you get exposure to AI, you get that kind of skilling in this wildly powerful and exciting new technology, but also have the choice to do it from home or when you see convenient, and that could be something that could create really valuable jobs in this AI era, which I think is going to be a really fascinating and potentially hairy one.
Yeah. Yes,
That it is for sure. Already is.
I know.
Exactly.
All right. I do think we should do like a Duckbill deep dive too. I just think there's so many angles on it. It's fascinating. I'm so glad it's doing so well. Back to your story a little bit. So we have Uber. You have 2 kids. I'm stunned. Then you moved to Oscar, COO. I'm curious. And then even before we get to Duckbill, how did kids coming on the scene affect, and it probably didn't happen right away, but over time, how did becoming a mother impact what your purpose was at work, the role that work played for you, how that wasn't for your identity? I'm curious, like the evolution alongside these new jobs.
You all ask the best questions. So it impacted me wildly.
Yeah.
And first and foremost, in how having kids raised the opportunity cost of how I was spending my days. I mentioned at the outset, like, I love to work. I find it fun. Not everyone has that value or passion, and that's fine. Again, no judgment in that. But knowing that about myself, I suspected, and it bore out to be true, that I still wanted to have some kind of professional aspect of my life, even while having kids. But I'll tell you, having them at home really made me feel like what I am doing professionally better be really freaking good.
Yeah.
In the sense of it has to be mission aligned. I have to be making the world a little bit better for these precious humans that I love more than anything.
Yeah.
I have a exceedingly low, even lower than I had before, for bullshit. And let's be real, like I say to people, work is hard. There's a reason you get paid to do it. No job is without some amount of bullshit. But if a job turns into, or if I'm looking at a new job and it's clear that it's still a whole lot of bullshit, that is not worth my time. Because would I rather be, managing somebody upward or downward who is not aligned with my values, where I don't have empowerment to lead in a way that I see fit, to build a product that I think is making the world a slightly better place? Or would I rather be with these little humans who, as much as it might drive me crazy to be with them 24 hours a day, they really want that. And they might need it sometimes. And so I think a really healthy way has made me reconsider what matters at work, how I'm spending my time. I don't know that I would have started my own company, but for having kids at home, because it was a way that I could almost guarantee I was building in a way that was aligned with my values. I was building a product that was aligned with my values. And it's not necessary to start your own company to do that, but it's why I went to Oscar, right? Health insurance, democratizing excellent healthcare and health insurance for everybody with a team that I loved. It's the reason I, started Duckbill and hired a team that I love here. Hand selected investors, hand selected vendors, right? To be people that I really love and trust. Because if too much of my day or my time is not aligned with my values, feels like a waste of time, that's really going to start causing some anxiety for me about the balance of time that I'm spending professionally versus at home with these kids.
Yeah. I totally want to reinforce once kids are on the scene, being way more critical of how I'm spending my time and is it worth it? And what makes it worth it to me? And the mission orientation is really important. I totally agree. How do you, one thing that we've talked about in other interviews is this idea of control or agency, and that being essential once you have kids, where you want to be where you need to be when you want to be there. And there was, I think by the nature of the people we've been talking to, there's been sort of this sense that kind of control isn't possible in corporate America, especially as you go up the ranks. And that the solution, or at least a solution, is starting your own thing, working for yourself. And I'm curious, you've been in all of those circumstances with kids. And I'm curious if you agree, or if you think, well, there are different ways to make it happen in different situations.
I am ever the optimist. So I think there are always strategies, but I think your insight that it's a lot easier when you're running your own thing, whether that's because you are in a role, a senior enough role in corporate America, or because you are in a culture that respects that and values that. I have seen companies like that, and they are unbelievably wonderful places to work.
Yeah.
Or you've started your own thing, and that could be a company, it could be consulting, whatever it is. Of course that gives more flexibility. I've told people when I was at Oscar, and I loved my time at Oscar, I was the number 2 person of the company, and nobody asked whether I was available for a board meeting on the particular dates. Like, I was told, here are the board dates.
Right. Yeah.
And you will be in this city for this board meeting on these dates. And that's fine. That's just how board scheduling goes.
Yeah.
But now that I am CEO of my own company, is sorry, if this date does not work for me, if my kid has a school concert that night and I can't travel, or if, that day is the play or whatever during the school day.
Yeah.
And that is an unbelievable luxury. Now, I think the reality is not everybody has the privilege, ability, desire to start their own thing. And so I think the next best thing is finding a company with the culture of supporting that. And
Yeah.
I think, again, there are always trade-offs. Of course, I've missed kids' stuff because not only do I have my own company, I sit on a couple of boards and I don't have total control around when those are scheduled. I can give input, but I have to make trade-offs about where I am and what I miss. And, I think my advice is to make sure you're looking at not every micro decision, but the macro whole. Is the overall balance of time, trade-offs that you're getting out of this aligned with your values and goals at whatever moment in time that you're at?
Yeah.
And if so, great. If not, then maybe it is time to find a different job, a different company, whatever.
Yeah. I always think about role models, and I feel like women in particular are like, find a role model and find a mentor. And it's like, okay, well, that'll what,
Yeah,
and all your
no
stereotypes.
worries. Totally. Yeah.
yeah, but you're my mentor. No, I'm just kidding. No, I'm just curious how,
Say it, Sarah.
yeah, exactly. How, as an outsider, to me, you're pioneering in so many ways in this career that you've built, both in the roles that you have, but also, doing it as a mother. How did you look around and say, who's, I don't know, are there people modeling a healthy version of this? And then on top of that, how were you thinking about your mother who, as you're described, incredibly capable, smart, motivated, took years off? And then it sounds like maybe eventually went back to work. I don't know. But how did you exist between like those two models?
Oh, it is such a good question. And honestly, before the two main industries that I have spent time in are finance and tech.
Yeah.
And neither has an
Casually male
abundance.
Dominated.
Exactly.
I was the only woman employee.
Yes, probably. I mean, virtually in a lot of those settings, yes.
Yeah.
Certainly in a lot of the meetings and a lot of the rooms that, and I think there was, let me be really candid. There was a time in my life where I felt like I needed to fit one mold or the other, right? And I showed up at work like behaving in ways that weren't totally authentic to me.
Sure.
Not only was that the least happy time in my career, it was also the least effective time in my career, because I remember at one point being told, like, you need to be fiercer, and walking into a meeting, and the poor person who was sitting across the table from me and who had just gotten the feedback, be fiercer, like, was like, what is going on? This is not you. Like, what is like, terrible feedback you're giving me.
Yeah.
And I think it took time and experience and wisdom and confidence to figure this all out. What I will tell you now is, like, first of all, every ounce of energy that I was spending trying to be someone that I wasn't was taking away from me just being good at my job.
Yeah.
And when I had that realization, it was table stakes. Like, I can't afford the time and energy and grief of trying to be somebody else. And then the second realization that came out of that is, I don't need to have a person that I want to be just like. I can have people who I want to take this from person a little bit of this from person B, and I want to channel them in certain instances or in certain aspects of their life. But there's only one me, and I'm going to bring the mix of ingredients into a person in a way that's probably not going to look exactly like anybody else, but of course, because we're all our own people. From my dad, I have taken this kind of like deep enjoyment of a robust career and the prioritization of doing that 5 days a week at least. And then from my mom, I'm oversimplifying here, but from my mom, like being present, being that emotional support, like the co-regulator of a full childhood. I've taken from different bosses that I've worked for, right? Like Travis, who founded Uber. I think his bravery, his courage, his vision are extraordinary. And then there are other people I've worked for where their humanity, their empathy, their, the incredible efficacy to bring out the best in people around them. That's what I take from them. And so I think for me, it's a matter of building a mosaic of different things that I've taken from different role models and bringing them to life in my own person in a way that might not have an exact mold, but for me, that's okay at this stage in my life.
I love what you said about the realization that this time I was spending trying to do my job like someone else was taking away from me doing my job well as only I can do it. And on that point, I also think as I'm looking back on it now, there was a shift once I became a mom and I felt more entitled to being me and felt more empowered as being me. I think I definitely am someone who, and I think a lot of women feel this way, but there's, I don't know, you get, maybe if you're lucky, to teenagehood as yourself. And then you hit teenagehood and you're like, I'm supposed to be all these things to all these people. What do they think of me? And then I think it wasn't until I had a kid that I was sort of like, I am me, like, fuck you. And not to say that I could play that at work so well, but I do think there's a grounding that happens as a mother. And I say this too, because I'm not sure how I feel about leading with, I'm a mom. Like, I don't feel
100%.
That doesn't feel true to me. I enjoy being with and enabling and getting joy out of my kids and helping them be great. Like, I think from more like a coach standpoint, not like the mother, but on that mother point, like, how does mother show up in these scenes where, again, you are potentially one of women in these meetings? Like, were you hiding your motherness, or was it part of the discussion? Like, how did you walk that line?
I have absolutely been in meetings and conversations and relationships where I was, I would never hide it, but I wasn't advertising it. And they were primarily in earlier phases of my career and earlier phases of my confidence building and earlier phases of being a parent. But I would be lying if I said those didn't happen today. Of course, there are people that you interact with in the world who don't have, frankly, I just say it directly, like an enormous amount of respect for women, for mothers, for parents, for working women, mothers, parents. Right? And each of us has the choice to show up how we want to show up in each of those meetings, in each of those conversations or relationships. And frankly, I don't want to spend a ton of time with someone who doesn't have a lot of respect for women, moms, parents. But I find myself in those conversations from time to time, of course. And we're all, we go into survival mode and we do our best. But to your point, I think I am also not the kind of person for whom parenthood is my primary identity. And again, no judgment. There are
I love everyone's like, I can't say this. I'm going to get in trouble. No, and it's not you. I just think I think that is fascinating. And even goes back to the Duckbill concept of like, I was watching you and I apologize if I was doing it too. I was watching some of your interviews and I was like, these people are kind of giving her a hard time for trying to help mothers, like make their lives easier. And there's something very strange, even as I was approaching this podcast, like, mothers are a very powerful, opinionated group. And I like to think that in reality, face to face, that we are much more supportive and open and inclusive and flexible about all the things. But there is this tendency, it's like it's a prickly space. You don't want to say the wrong thing.
It is so prickly. And I get it, right? Like, it is unbelievably hard being a woman, being a mother, being someone who is in a minority position in certain rooms, and any one person telling you how you should show up as that person, period, especially if you're in that position, is going to could potentially feel threatening. And I think, mothers aren't a monolith. Women are not a monolith. If you don't want to outsource anything, like, that's cool. You do you, know, but if you do, my belief is that it should be easier and more affordable and possible for you to do that. And if not, like, don't use the product.
Totally. Are you good at asking for help or accepting help? Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah.
I think, frankly, I've gotten much better at managing, delegating, leading in my career. And I like to think that when it comes to running a business, I couldn't do it without help. But especially in my personal life, so many of us have been conditioned and trained to not ask for help. And especially if you're in a relationship or a conversation like the one you alluded to earlier, where you can't talk about having kids in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
And so asking for help about your kids is like double whammy, you know?
Yeah.
And I think part of our big objective at Duckbill is to not require you to be a expert delegator or a comfortable outsourcer to use the product. That is certainly a profile of people that we have on the product, but frankly, it's the minority of the world that feels like a confident delegator. And so I try to not even use the word delegation when it comes to the product itself, because I think that word is so fraught. And the way we think about it is Duckbill is the place you come to get stuff done. And
Yeah.
to the extent you need help, we're here to help with it.
Mm-hmm.
But also you retain as much of that decision authority or control as you want. And I think that's an important part of the product experience, to get people comfortable with something that for many is an understandably unnatural act.
Yeah. Yeah. An unnatural act. I love it.
Sarah, does that
I can own
resonate with
that.
you?
Yes.
Truly just had a conversation about that this morning. It is hard. On
Yes.
one hand, you're like, I can't do it all. On the other hand, you're like, but I have to because no one else will do it like me.
I know. I'm always like, I'll just, whatever, I'll just do it.
Just do it.
I mean,
It's
it was
fine.
true in like,
Yeah.
I don't know, 7th grade diorama projects. Like, it's
Yeah.
just been,
100%.
something's wrong with me. Are you the oldest,
God.
Megan, in your family or no? No.
Course. Yes.
You are, of course. Okay.
Yes. And I had this whole conversation with my husband the other day about how much we both disliked group projects in school.
Yeah.
And it's not because we
Yeah.
don't like working with people. I love that.
Same.
Is what gets me out of bed in the morning. But
Yes.
my God, you know, it's kind of like parenthood, right? And I think one of the reasons that parenthood is so hard, and this whole question you raised earlier around what is the value of my parenthood and am I doing a good job, is so fraught, because there's no clear North Star that you're aiming towards.
Yeah.
Definition of success. There is no training or feedback loop that is reliable in telling you if you are doing a good job. And you are dealing with irrational, highly emotional humans and topics constantly.
Yeah.
And so, of course, it's hard. Of course, it's fraught. Of course, it's hard to figure out whether you're doing it right or you're adding any value. And I just think, you know, the more that we can bring humor and levity and, again, an option for people, and then they can choose to use it if it's a great product. And if it's not, that's on us to continue making it better.
Totally. Totally. Have there been, or if you look back, and we've gotten a few funny anecdotes out of other folks about like these moments where you're like, I don't know, it's a dark time and you're like, I don't even know if we can get through this. Or there's some like highly public scenario where you're like, someone in another interview was telling us that she was like somewhat recently postpartum, and she was interviewing someone essentially at Davos and was like, and then I just started lactating like in the middle of this interview. I'm just curious, like your sort of behind the scenes, Megan, like these times where you're like, this is a disaster. Like, how are we, like everything's falling apart. How do we get through this? This is humiliating,
Like
but maybe we should laugh at it.
Daily. How much time do you have?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So this morning, I could think of a few examples.
I could literally tell stories from this morning. One of my favorites was when I was at Uber, and I had just had my first kiddo, and a new president of the business had started. And I felt that it was important to show up for this big global leadership offsite that he was attending, to get to know him before my parental leave was over. And it just so happened that the global leadership meeting was in Amsterdam. And I decided to go. Cried for days before I left, because I was like, now in retrospect, postpartum anxious and depressed and all the things.
Yeah.
And finally summoned the courage and energy to go. And I was flying over to Amsterdam and thinking, well, of all the places in the world, like this should be a good one. Land in Amsterdam and realize that there's not actually a mother's room in the Amsterdam Uber office, because in Amsterdam, mothers get a year off.
Right. Yeah.
And they don't have to pump at the office. So instead, I brought my little pump to a engineering nap room, which looked like a very chic CIA interrogation room. It had like a single light bulb hanging down, again, in like Scandinavian design, but turned the switch and nothing happened except the light bulb went out. And what I realized
God.
was that the fuse in the pump had blown. I hadn't thought about the fact that,
No,
you know,
Megan.
the
It's
electronics
different.
were not set up
Yes.
for Europe.
Yep.
So my pump was broken within like an hour of landing for my 4 or 5 day trip. So I hand pumped
Megan.
for 4 straight days, whatever it was. And then had to bring this back through the airport because I was like,
Yeah.
I fought tooth and nail.
Of
for
course.
this.
Yes.
This is the best milk that has ever
Yes.
been made.
Yes.
Yeah.
Certainly the hardest one.
Yeah.
And actually, I found U.S. airports to be pretty understanding of this. The European airport was not. And they were like, what is this vanilla? I'm like, vanilla's not even white. It's like,
Yeah.
this is breast milk. Let me through. But like, it was a dark several days. And, you know, it was, in retrospect, it is a very funny story thinking about like, my pump broke.
Nothing to see here.
But in
It's
that
fine.
moment, no.
It was horrifying. And
I would
felt
be
so
enraged.
guilty.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it was scary. I was like back in my hotel room trying to call U.S. customer support off
Yeah.
hours, right?
Yeah.
And frankly, it led to me making slightly different decisions in subsequent parental leaves where,
Mhm.
again, everybody is different. And I would not expect
Mhm.
any other person
Yeah.
to have preferences that look exactly like mine. But I actually like getting back to some amount of adult interaction
Yeah.
Yeah.
pretty early on. Like I like my brain to be stimulated. I
Yeah.
don't want to be
Yeah.
like doing, you know, brain surgery, but I like that. What I have struggled with, obviously, is travel, right? Travel is hard.
Sure.
Yeah.
And so in subsequent parental leaves, I've
Yeah.
been more intentional about how I spend that time. And frankly, that's only the kind of thing that you can learn when
Yeah.
From
you're
Yeah.
experience.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I
You
also
tried
think
it.
about,
Didn't work. That's okay.
totally.
Exactly.
I also think about like that story, you know, this is logistically challenging, but then also you're supposed to show up and participate in various meetings, probably presenting at these places. And like in the back
Not
of
be
your mind
distracted.
is how maybe I'm physically uncomfortable and who knows how it's like and that's at least taking up 70% of your like brain space with that was
100%.
of swirl and how much it doesn't have to be women that are having these experiences, but how much there is something that going on often for women in their brain that is like worrying. And maybe Duckbill can address some of it. This is like a darker one, but like, you know, before our third kid, I had some miscarriages and not in a thankfully horrific way, but
I'm
like,
so sorry.
you know, like dealing with that at work, you know, and you're just like,
yes.
None of this matters. Do you know what I'm going through? Like, oh
but
my
also
God.
being like, but maybe,
Yeah.
and it's sort of, it's almost, it's helpful
It's good to have a
perspective,
distraction
sort of,
and-
but then
yeah.
also like, but something real is happening. And I think, again,
Yeah.
not only women, mothers have this, but I think always women and mothers have it.
Yeah.
Where there's so much, they're operating on so many different levels while at work. And just
Amen.
how impressive that is. I don't know if I need acknowledgement or space, like, or just being like, that is the reality for us. I certainly, especially in certain
Yes.
phases more than other phases of parenting. But I almost think that it's taken for granted, or it's not, it's kind of like, we'll buck up and move on or go take like medical leave. And it's kind of like, we want something in between.
Yeah.
Exactly. And I think that's where working in a place that is aligned with your values is, I find, really helpful.
Yeah.
And it's not to say it needs to be this like soft, squishy place where we don't want to win and it's all about supporting people's feelings. And, you know, Uber is the great example for me where like it was so much about winning and getting this business off the ground that we knew could improve communities, that it actually, for better or for worse, the how you got there didn't matter as much. And I give this feedback to a lot of my people where I think a lot of feedback is often delivered, unfortunately, around your personality or who you are as a person, and not about the results that the organization needs to see. And like the feedback around, you need to be more fierce. It's like what I should have asked the person giving me that feedback was like, okay, what result am I not delivering that you want to see? And then I'll figure out how to get myself to that result.
So true.
But, you know, like I think it is what allowed the company to promote me when I was 7 months pregnant and be like, obviously the right answer, because like Meghan really wants to win. And like, she's not going to let having a kid stop her. Or, you know, like, I might take day to like go have a doctor's appointment or deal with whatever I'm dealing with, but you bet your fucking ass I'm going to be back, like fighting to win as soon as I'm able. And that is going to carry the day 7 days of the week. Right. And so I think, to your point, finding a place where all shapes and sizes are welcome if you deliver on the mission or you deliver on the goals, I've found to be really, you know, helpful, but also wildly energizing and rewarding too.
Yeah. This is a good transition to a very light, quick question that you touched on the beginning was, can women have it all?
Yeah.
Just a quick one. I think we can figure it out. I am curious. I know it's cool that you went there from the very beginning also, of like that was such a formative, that was a concept that resonated with you early on. Not everyone has responded to it that way when I've been asking this question about having it all. But how do you think about having it all? What is it all? Should we have it all? Like, what do you think?
I think the question is like, what is the definition of it all?
Yeah.
And I think for me, it comes back to this quote around your one wild and precious life.
We love Mary Oliver.
I have it on my wall.
Exactly. Yeah. I feel like quote has become kind of cheesy and maybe.
No, I know. I'm annoyed now. True. It's everywhere. I can't. Right? It doesn't feel as cool anymore.
We liked it before it was cool.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, sorry.
Exactly. The OGs, the Mary Oliver OGs. I love this. So, you know, for me, that is so true, so relatable. Life is so short and precious. And what are the essential things that you want in that one wild and precious life, and without judgment of yourself or anyone else? And I think if the answer to the question is, I want to be able to have a really big, impactful career and kids that I have some semblance of a good relationship with and who are like, you know, as well adjusted as one can be in this world. Yeah. I totally think you can have it all. Now, does it involve trade-offs? Of course it does. Like, I'm not there for everything with my kids. I'm not there for everything professionally. Like, I will tell you, like, I rarely hang out with my friends. I have amazing friends who understand this about me and are incredibly supportive in spite of the fact that I don't see them every weekend.
I know, that's why you don't call Meghan. It's totally fine.
You're friends,
but then
like
we
me.
pick up where we left off, right? So totally trade-offs, but having a really impactful job and kids, yes, you can. And it should be more common than it is, which is part of why we want companies like Duckbill to exist and maybe policies that make it easier to have flexible work or leave when you need it.
Yeah.
Because I think that choice should be available to more people who want it, men and women alike. But I think, it is possible, and we're fighting more and more every day to make it even more possible for more people.
Yeah. I love it.
Yay.
Yeah. I think so. I think it really goes it's to that it all. Like, and I think that's a very personal choice, because can you have it all within, and having it define your it all, which includes defining what the trade-offs are, short term or long term. And I think another conversation that's come up is it's more about sequencing. And do we need to have it all now, or can we? I know there's trends around taking a power pause, which certainly means there's a lot of privilege to allow that to happen. But yes, this idea of like when, and I think for women thinking more long, your career is a long arc, or can be if you want it to be. And kind of fighting 100%. The sense of America's like, be successful, be a CEO like yesterday. And a little bit like, well, maybe I can do a slow build, or go all in and then step out a little bit, go all in, you know? Which is not the male way.
100%. It is, I think men could probably actually learn a lot from women in how they like many women have these different phases of their life and their career. And I wonder, I don't know how many men get to the end of their lives and say, gosh, I wish I had a phase of investing in X. I also think one thing you said, and it's so true, is it requires a pretty immense amount of privilege to have it all today in America.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
That to me is a travesty.
I know.
Because that means that this whole Mary Oliver Wild and Precious life, some of us have more access to that than others.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And that to me does not feel like the kind of thing that some people should have more access to than others.
Yeah. Yeah.
To me, it's like, again, there are always trade-offs involved, of course, but are those trade-offs less? Are those trade-offs easier? For the
Yeah.
privileged right now, yeah, they are.
Totally.
Because
Yeah.
privileged people can buy back their time. They, like Sheryl Sandberg, can hire these teams of people. And I think that to me is the core problem, right?
Yeah.
That it shouldn't require so much privilege, money, ability to shape your career in the way you want to have it all. And
Yeah.
what we can do in this endless pursuit of maximizing our one precious life is make it a little easier for more people to live the life that
Yeah.
they want.
Yeah. So when are you running for office?
Oh gosh, that is one trade-off that is not happening anytime soon.
Well, you would crush it. I think I've heard that women need to be told 7 times to run for office before they like believe it, compared to a guy who probably is never told.
Never told.
So count that as 1.
Be safe for both of you and anyone listening. Run, because my God, the data, the statistics tell you that organizations and governments reach better answers when there are women around the table. Like,
of course,
it's crazy, doesn't it?
We need you.
Huh?
Yes. Yes.
Shocking.
I know we're a little over time. Do you have like 4 minutes to ask these last questions?
Of course I do.
Are you sure? I apologize.
No,
this has gone longer than our others. I'm like,
joy.
Okay, Megan, tell me more. Thank you for indulging us. Okay, these are short answer, rapid fiery that we like to get from everybody. But so if you could go back to your new mom self and tell her one thing, like what would you say?
Say, it's hard for you to believe, but this is just a phase. Anything you're dealing with right now is just a phase.
Mm-hmm.
And I have had this realization with now my 3rd child where, the lack of sleep, I realize, oh, it's just a phase. And I'm trying to turn that same perspective to my older kids where like, oh, they're having a meltdown or they're going through something tough socially. It's just a phase.
Yes.
And it'll pass.
Yeah. Yeah. If you could, well, this might be a convenient question for you. If you could provide yourself or your family one thing along the journey of motherhood that would have made the process just a little bit easier. And maybe if it can't be Duckbill.
I was just going to
say.
Because obviously Duckbill, but other than Duckbill.
Other than Duckbill, which everybody should try. Yes. Use the code the mothers.
Yes, the mothers. Yes.
No, honestly, I would say I'm tempted to have 2 answers and they're related. One is self-forgiveness, because you will not always get it right. Like even the people I know who do this best, this meaning like parenthood, work, anything else, it's like 50, 60, 40 that you like make the right call. I'm putting this in air quotes.
Yeah.
And I think life, one of my biggest pieces of advice in business, but also in parenthood is, it's not the decision you make most of the time that dictates whether things work out okay. It's how you execute against that. Are you willing to be dynamic and adaptable and candid and like forgive yourself and just move on? And and I would say like in cheek, but only half is like a good therapist, honestly.
Yeah. Oh my God. Yes.
I think
yes.
It has been critical for me in learning self-forgiveness.
Yeah.
Because we all deserve that. And sometimes,
so true.
Some help and reminders of that can be really valuable.
Yes. Okay, last one. Your kids may be listening, or one day they will. Is there anything you'd like to say to them?
I think it is this, that I really want them to believe that they can have it all, and they don't have to. That they are perfect the way they are, and everything I do at the end of the day is for them, right? And they will be better off if it weren't. Like they will be better off if I'm sane and happy. They will be better off, I think, if this product works, and changes how people operate.
Yeah.
And yet I would give it all up for them in a heartbeat,
Yeah.
And so I think it comes down to that impossibility of being a parent, and maybe especially a mom, which is these little kiddos matter more than anything.
Yeah.
And yet, might we all have a rich life that goes even beyond that?
Right.
If that's what we choose.
Yes, totally. Very well said.
So sweet.
Thank you so much, Megan.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for
This has
sharing
been
yourself
such a
with us.
joy.
Thank you for
Gosh,
building a
for
profound
sure.
company and with the right mission and all of the things. So, and thank you
Truly.
for doing it the way that you are. Like, this is the reason that we want women in leadership roles, because they'll make the right choices. They'll know to make the sacrifice, because in the short term it might be painful, but the long term it pays off, like, because they've
Yeah.
experienced it themselves. So, and I know that's not easy.
And Sara Vee, thank you for this podcast. I mean, honestly, the self-forgiveness, the forming of role models, the normalizing of really hard and impossible and very personal things and trade-offs, like you are giving that to people with these conversations. So
Yeah.
thank you for doing this. It's incredible.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We're all trying to make the world better.
Amen.
Someone has to.
Amen.
Doing our best.
Exactly. If you need
Okay,
something
cool.
done, ask a busy woman and they will make the world better.
I know, she was so
Energized. I'm like,
so
how do you-
energized.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're so on it for having a baby.
Yeah. Yeah.
I admire it.
Yeah. And I also think there's I don't know, tell me if this is the wrong comparison. There are some people who are just athletic. There are also a lot of people who work really hard, try really hard, and like can perform at a certain level. Then there are people who like start from a meaningful level of athleticism, and they will almost probably always outperform the prior. I was thinking, as I was looking at Meghan and hearing her story, where there's some innate energy, drive, mental ability, where to be able to exist, operate at such a high level with such big jobs and have a life outside of it.
Yeah.
That I don't think I have. And I was just, and it's as I've seen, I don't know, there are other folks who, in some ways actually even came up when we were talking to April, where for her, it was joyful to be working on her business like 24 hours after having a kid. And to me, I think whatever my mental, emotional makeup is, there's something that like has trouble allowing for that or able to enjoy that. And I think Meghan is someone who seems to genuinely enjoy a circumstance that I otherwise find just stressful.
Sure. Yeah.
And endless and all these people, like she's had big jobs and obviously and building this very successful Duckbill is no picnic.
Yeah.
But I go back to the athleticism point. I'm curious if she would even articulate it this way. I feel like there's some innate ability to like surf the wave.
Yeah.
I think in those settings, I'm more like, there's a wave coming. We need to get out of the ocean.
Yeah. Well, I also think she does like a great job of acknowledging too that like for her this works and that everybody is going to have their different
Totally.
things, right? And I love
think,
that.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think what was I don't know if it's an aha moment or what, for me was like, there's something about some people that enjoy that. And then there's something about other people that aren't able to enjoy that. And I think for me, I always thought it was an ability thing of like, well, if I was smarter, if I'd gone to business school, if I went to whatever it is. Yes. If I not worked harder, because I'm willing to work, but like if I were better at it, I could do that. And I think there's also this other piece that goes back to this question of like having it all and defining what it all is to you and making that a personal choice, not a what would be impressive choice or what does the world want me to be doing choice. And that high-powered corporate job, for me, I feel a loss of all when I think about it. Meghan is her all with that. And I think that's, I don't know, to the point of all of us being like, I don't want to offend anyone. Everyone can make their own choice. Please don't judge me for saying I need to also work, not be at home. And like, I just think there needs to be more like generosity of the spirit and assumption of good intent when we talk about these things. But I think it was helpful for me to be able to ask her these questions and be like, maybe it's not that I'm incapable or dumb and not smart enough, essentially. Maybe it's that I'm not wired to enjoy that. I don't know.
I think like the big word that I kept hearing even though I think she only actually said it once because I was surprised that it hadn't come up, was like intention and how everything is so intentional. Like everything that she
Yeah.
does is so intentional. And again, going back to it, the acknowledgement of like, for some people, this is what works and feels good. And for some people, it doesn't. And that's just okay.
Yeah.
Like it is not we all, for her answer to like have it all, that is so vastly different for everybody, and the
Yeah.
privilege in that and the different like settings and expectate like that, there's just too
Yeah.
much variety to say,
Yeah.
yeah, you should also be able to do this, or you should also want to do this.
Correct.
And I love that.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Totally. And I also, as you think about like parenting your own kids, like how do you ensure that they're exposed to these other paths?
Mhm.
Like one thing I often think regretfully about is that I think my college experience at Harvard, if you're listening, did not open up career opportunities that got close to my it all. It
Uh-huh.
only highlighted finance and consulting.
Mhm.
And for me, those were just as we're saying now, those
Yeah.
are actually things that I feel like I lose my all.
Mhm.
But I felt like therefore I'm a failure because I'm not like living up to those
Right.
roles,
Right.
or I feel like I can't hack it in that life.
I think in a beautiful way, and I hope that as generations come, that will change. I hope.
Yeah. Yeah. Or also like find find the right school that fits
Right.
that fits you. But
That too.
yeah. And also I think one of the things that I'm excited about doing, I enjoy about doing this now relative to what I was doing before. I feel like our kids are like, they can
Fun
see
and
something
exciting.
different
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
So that's, yeah, I don't know.
Mm.
A lot of learnings for me.
You're doing great, Sarah. You're wired just perfect the way you are.
Oh, thanks, V. You too.
It's true. Thanks.
Yeah. We do have to say, and you'll see this in elsewhere, but everyone should try Duckbill. We do have a code. If you use the mothers, you'll get 50% off. That's wrong. 30% off.
If you use the code the mothers, it's actually free.
Exactly. And if it's not,
We're gonna
contact
pay-
Megan.
We're gonna pay for it for you.
Yeah. Use the code the mothers and you will get, oh wait, I was right. 50%
Yeah.
off for 3 months.
That's
where
amazing.
the 3 was
The
strung up
30.
in my head.
Mhm.
Yeah, Duckbill. Get Duckbill.
Amazing.
Yeah, a really fabulous concept. Okay.
Sarah,
Speaking of Duckbill allowing us to have joy, where is our joyfulness? Where are we feeling the joy? My quick answer, that's not my real answer, but our youngest child has been constipated for so long and she finally let it all happen and I am so relieved.
absolutely get it.
And then otherwise I think my joy is maybe letting go a little bit more this week. I think I'm like in a control freak phase. I think
You're growing
Yeah.
your baby. That's okay.
I think so, maybe.
Yeah.
So yeah, just like letting it roll a little bit more, like be cool, mom, be cool.
You're so cool.
Would be nice. Oh, actually, here's one thing. My oldest son is a dream. He's been so nice lately. He out of nowhere at bath time yesterday came up to me and was like, okay, before we get into like the craziness of bedtime, I just want you to know, and I know V, you know him, so this is also all because of you.
Oh my God.
He comes up to me, he put his hands on my shoulders and looks me in the eye and he says, Mom, thank you for all the I feel like I'm making this up. He says, thank you for everything that you do. You do so much for us. And gave me a hug. And I was like,
What does he want? No.
really taken aback.
Oh my God.
I know. And this comes from a kid who he hasn't always noticed what's going on or been able to act on what he's noticing going on around. So I think that was a really nice, seeing them grow up and become more people and hopefully good ones is nice.
Hearing that's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah. Good guy.
We love you.
I know.
Damn.
Okay. So anyway, how's your joy? Where's your joy?
I have like a few little things. My first is that I get to see you this afternoon.
Yes.
I'm excited to see you in person because it's been so long and I'm
So
excited
long.
to hug.
So long. Yes.
So that's one thing. And then other little things of joy. Honestly, I think I was feeling a little sad yesterday we'll dive into it on our one-on-one next week. But then saying it to you and being like, yeah,
Yeah.
that's valid. I don't know. It
Yeah.
just felt good to hear.
Yes.
And I think I just needed to feel validated in my
Yeah.
sadness. And now I feel like I can move on from it. So that
Yeah.
feels joyful too, to release and similar to you, let go of that.
Yes.
So those are my two things. That's where my joy
Those
is.
are good. I enjoy our joys because they also turn into like what we're grateful for, which is
I
a
know.
nice
Well,
blend.
they're intertwined.
It's all of them. It's totally
Yeah.
gratitude and joy. Can't have one without the other.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
All right.
let's close this out so you can get over here.
Yeah.
And I love you so much.
I love you.
Thank you for doing this. I'll see you soon. Thank you so much for joining us. Please remember to like and subscribe so you don't miss an episode and we can reach even more rock stars like you. The Mothers is a production of Backline Media, shining a light on those who carry the team.